Hi, I'm Jemima, and today I'll be talking about thermoregulation in the giant panda. Homeostasis is the constant maintenance of internal conditions despite changes in the external environment. Homeostasis is generally controlled by intricate feedback loops. Today I will be discussing thermoregulation with the giant panda. They live in high altitudes ranging from 2,000 to 4,000 meters, where the temperature can vary from 32 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of this large change in temperature, the panda has to adapt to regulate its body temperature in order to survive. Pandas use their fat, 3 to 4 inches of thick fur, and changes in subdermal vascularization to maintain their internal body temperature. However, what is thermoregulation? All organisms have adapted in a specialized way to maintain a stable environment, despite minor and extreme temperature change in the external environment. By maintaining their internal body temperature, the organism can survive and reproduce. Thermoregulation is achieved via structural, physiological, and behavioral mechanisms. If the internal body temperature was changing due to external conditions, then the body would try and bring it back to normal. This would be a negative response. However, a positive response would be if the internal body temperature kept getting, e.g. hotter or colder, and the body could not get it back to normal. This would result in death. When an organism gets too hot, the body will cool itself down, and if the body gets too cold, it will conserve and retain heat. The giant panda lives in bamboo forests in China. Their diet consists of leaves, stems, and shoots of various bamboo species. They must eat at least 12 to 38 kgs every day to make up for the lack of nutrition in bamboo. All that food is turned into energy and fat. These two things help keep the panda warm, without the panda having to lose energy by creating warmth. The adaptive advantage of thermoregulation is to keep the core temperature at its optimum. This will ensure that the panda and all other organisms will survive. This will also allow enzyme activity to function, so essential processes like respiration, DNA replication, and protein synthesis can occur. If the core temperature gets too hot, then it could cause enzymes to denature. When the enzyme denatures, they lose their shape, as the hydrogen bonds have been broken. This means they can no longer fit the substrate, so the specific task can no longer be performed. If the core temperature gets too cold, then the enzymes slow down as they do not have as much kinetic energy. This decrease in energy makes it harder for successful collisions to occur between molecules. In order for a molecule to collide successfully, there has to be sufficient force. There also has to be a lot of kinetic energy, and they have to collide at the right angle. If the core temperature is extremely cold, then the enzymes will become inactive, so no collisions will be successful due to the low kinetic energy. Another advantage is to avoid the extreme stresses of both hypothermia and hypothermia, which would use up vital energy and make the panda vulnerable. By regulating the body temperature and trying to keep it at its optimum, the body can avoid both circumstances. Hypothermia is a dangerous drop in the body temperature, usually caused by prolonged exposure to cold temperatures. When the balance between the body's heat production and heat loss tips towards heat loss for a prolonged period of time, hypothermia can occur. Hypothermia is the opposite. It is an increase in body temperature due to failed thermoregulation. Hypothermia occurs when the body produces or absorbs more heat than it can dissipate. Both hypothermia and hypothermia can result in death. Thermoregulation is extremely important as it allows the organism to still function even if the environment temperature is not favorable. This means that they will have more energy to survive and reproduce. As the panda is able to withstand hot and cold temperatures due to thermoregulation, it means the panda does not have to migrate. This means it doesn't have to lose energy, so it has more energy to survive and reproduce. It has 3 to 4 inches of thick, coarse fur. It has 2 layers of coat, a coarse outer layer and a dense, woolly underlayer, which prevents water penetration in the cool, damp climate where the panda usually lives. They also have a layer of fat around their body, which keeps them well insulated. This gives them surplus energy. Like most animals, pandas cannot sweat to cool them down. They can also not shed their fur, even in summer. The only way for a panda to cool down is through panting and a high respiration rate to dissipate some of the excess body heat. On a humid, hot summer's day, pandas will have low energy and will be trying to cool them down. Also, the giant panda is so big it is hard for heat to escape its body. Feedback is a process in which information about the past or present influences the same phenomenon in the present or future. As part of a chain of cause and effect that forms a circuit or loop, the event is said to be feedback into itself. The stimulus in this example is a colder temperature due to the altitude of the mountain. The detector is the peritopic area or the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is situated in the brain of the panda and connected to the pituitary. It has thermoreceptors, a receptive proton of a sensory neuron that can code for changes in temperature. For monitoring the blood, and acts as a control center for many homeostatic functions, like the body temperature. It has two thermoreceptors, which monitor the blood temperature as it passes through to get a reading of your core temperature. The skin receptor, cutaneous temperature sensitive receptor, and the hypothalamic structures are acted upon when there is a small change in temperature. This is triggered by nerve impulses from thermosensitive structures at the periphery. The hypothalamus would detect the change in core temperature, and it would also be processed by the hypothalamus so that the panda's body could slightly warm up and get back to its optimum. The effector would be countercurrent heat exchange of arterial and venous blood. The detector, processor, and effector would all work together to try get the panda back to its optimum temperature. The countercurrent heat exchange is used to minimize heat loss. In the panda's arm, deep arteries are surrounded by veins, and there are also veins close to the surface of the arm. On a cold day, the surface veins constrict, so most of the blood flows back to the heart through the deep veins, which are close to the arteries and flowing in the opposite direction. This would be countercurrent heat exchange. On a warm day, the internal arm veins constrict while the surface ones dilate, so most of the blood is now flowing back to the heart through the surface veins, and the heat is dissipated. The response would be vasoconstriction, which results in increased contraction of circular smooth muscles in the wall of the arteriole. Restricted by the increased blood means there is a reduction in heat loss from the skin. In doing so, the body conserves and retains heat. In the summer months in China, it is really hot. As pandas find it hard to cool down, it is likely on an extremely hot day a panda could get hypothermia if it does not find shade. The stimulus would be an extreme change in temperature where the external temperature would be very hot with little wind. The detector/receptor would be the hypothalamus, which monitors the blood temperature and the external temperature by the skin. After this has been recognized, it is processed by the brain/the hypothalamus and tries to send signals to the effector to try and regain the optimum temperature. The effector. When the core temperature is rising, the body will do everything it can to cool it down. For the panda, vasodilation will occur. Vasodilation is when there is an increased blood flow, so the blood is closer to the skin. This creates an increase in heat loss from the skin and helps cool the panda down. The panda will also pant, and the evaporation of water off its tongue will try and help cool it down. However, if it is a hot day in China, it will usually be humid, especially where the panda usually lives. This increase of water in the air will make it harder for the panda to lose heat, and panting will not be as successful. As this is a positive feedback loop, no matter what the panda tries to do, it will not be successful in regaining its optimum temperature. Instead, the temperature will keep rising. The response would be failed thermoregulation, because after a certain point, the body can no longer receive signals from the processor, the hypothalamus. So the body temperature would keep rising, and eventually enzymes would denature and the panda would die.